Senna didn't know the man watching her from the bar was the Alpha King. She didn't know he'd tracked her across 3 cities, following whispers of a woman who could see what others couldn't. And she definitely didn't know that being stood up tonight would drag her into a war she'd spent her entire life running from. All she knew was that Merrick was 47 minutes late, and the pitying looks from the waitstaff were becoming unbearable. The Verdant Lantern was the kind of restaurant where people came to be seen. Crystal chandeliers cast honey gold light across white tablecloths. Silverware gleamed. Couples leaned close, sharing secrets over wine that cost more than Senna made in a week. She'd borrowed the dress she was wearing from her roommate, emerald green, slightly too tight across the ribs, chosen because Merrick had mentioned once that green was his favorite color. 48 minutes. The waiter approached again, his smile strained with professional sympathy. "Perhaps you'd like to order an appetizer while you wait, miss?" "He's coming," Senna said, hating how defensive she sounded. "Traffic, probably." The waiter nodded, retreating with the kind of grace that suggested he'd seen this exact scene play out 100 times before. Woman dressed up, empty chair across from her. Hope curdling into humiliation 1 minute at a time. Senna checked her phone again. No messages, no missed calls. Just her own reflection in the dark screen. Mascara she'd applied too carefully. Lips painted a red she never wore. 52 minutes. She should leave. She knew she should leave, but something kept her rooted to the velvet chair. Some stubborn refusal to admit she'd been foolish enough to believe that this time might be different. That's when she felt it. A prickle at the back of her neck. The unmistakable weight of someone's gaze, heavy and deliberate. Senna looked up. He was already moving toward her. The crowd seemed to part for him without conscious thought, bodies shifting like water around stone. Tall, broad-shouldered. Dark hair pushed back from a face that belonged on ancient coins, sharp cheekbones, a jaw carved from granite, and eyes the color of aged whiskey, amber gold and unnervingly focused. On her. Before Senna could react, he pulled out the empty chair across from her and sat down, settling into it like he'd been expected all along. "His mistake," the stranger said, his voice low and rich, edged with something that might have been amusement. "Not yours." Senna's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Excuse me?" The man who was supposed to be sitting here. He picked up the menu, scanning it with casual interest. "He's a fool for not showing. That's his mistake, not yours." "I don't know what you think you're—" "The lamb here is excellent," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "But the duck is better." "Do you eat duck?" Senna stared at him. The audacity of it, the sheer arrogance, should have made her furious. And it did, partially. But underneath the anger was something else. Curiosity. Because there was no lie curling around his words. That was her gift. Her curse. The thing she'd hidden since she was 7 years old and told her mother that Daddy was lying about working late. She saw deception the way other people saw color. Lies manifested as smoke, dark tendrils that wrapped around the speaker's throat and mouth. Thicker for bigger lies, fainter for small ones. Most people walked around wreathed in gray, casual dishonesty so constant they didn't even notice it themselves. But this man was clear. Crystal clear. Not a wisp of shadow anywhere. "Who are you?" Senna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who needs your help." He set down the menu and met her eyes, and the intensity in that gaze made her breath catch. "And someone who's willing to pay handsomely for it." "You have the wrong person." "No. Certainty, absolute and unwavering." "I really don't." The waiter reappeared, visibly relieved that the empty chair was now occupied. "Sir, can I get you something to drink?" "A bottle of the Monteverdi Reserve," the stranger said without looking away from Senna, "and the duck for both of us." "I haven't agreed to stay." Senna said sharply. No, but you haven't left either. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but something close. Your date made a choice. Now you get to make one. Stay and hear what I have to say, or leave and spend the rest of your life wondering what you missed. The waiter hovered uncertainly. Senna should leave. Every instinct she'd developed over 24 years of survival screamed at her to grab her borrowed clutch and walk out the door. But his words carried no smoke, no shadow. Whatever he was offering, he believed it completely. Fine, she heard herself say. One drink, then you talk. That's all I'm asking. The waiter scurried away. Senna leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms over the too-tight dress, studying the stranger with new eyes. Clear. Utterly clear. She'd never seen anyone like him. Start with your name, she said. Corvin. He offered it simply, no title attached, but something in the way he held himself suggested there should be one. And you're Senna Voss, 24 years old. Relocated 6 times in the past 3 years, currently working as a researcher at Thornwood Archives, though you're overqualified for the position. His head tilted slightly. Running from something, or perhaps hiding from someone. Ice slid down Senna's spine. How do you know all that? I make it my business to know things. He paused as the waiter returned with wine, watching as their glasses were filled with something dark and red. Especially about people I need. You don't need me. I do. He lifted his glass but didn't drink. Just held it, watching the candlelight play through the wine. More than you can possibly imagine. The duck arrived. Senna didn't touch it. She couldn't. Not with her stomach twisted into knots. Not with this stranger's impossible knowledge hanging between them like a blade. Whatever you think I can do, she said carefully, you're wrong. You see lies. 4 words. 4 simple words. And her entire world tilted sideways. I don't know what you're... There. Corvin pointed at her, something almost like satisfaction flickering across his features. Right now, shadows forming around your throat. Faint because you almost believe your own denial, but there nonetheless. He leaned forward. You've been able to see them since you were a child. You thought you were broken at first, then cursed, then gifted. Now you just think of it as dangerous. Senna's hands trembled beneath the table. No one knew. No one. She'd spent her entire life making sure of it, swallowing the truth every time she saw a husband lie to his wife, a boss deceive his employees, a friend betray another with a smile. How? The word came out cracked. How could you possibly know? Your mother knew. The breath left Senna's lungs. Isabeth Voss, Corvin continued, his voice gentling slightly. She had the same gift. Weaker than yours, but present. She recognized it in you early, taught you to hide it, to protect yourself. She knew what happened to people like you if the wrong person found out. Senna's vision blurred. Her mother, dead for 8 years now. Cancer, the doctors said. But Senna had always wondered if it was something else, if the constant vigilance, the endless hiding, the weight of seeing every ugly truth the world tried to conceal had simply worn her down to nothing. She left messages, Corvin said, with people who traffic in secrets, instructions on how to find you if you were ever needed, if someone trustworthy ever came looking for someone with your ability. And you're trustworthy? Senna laughed, the sound bitter and brittle. Some stranger who stalked me across 3 cities? I'm desperate. His words carried no deception, not a single wisp of darkness around them. There's a difference. Desperate for what? Corvin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped, carrying an edge of something she recognized instinctively as grief. 3 years ago, my parents were murdered, poisoned at their own table, surrounded by people they trusted. His jaw tightened. The killer was never found. Because the killer is still there. Still sitting in my council chambers, still smiling at me across the breakfast table, still plotting. Those unsettling eyes locked onto hers. I've spent 3 years trying to identify them, investigated everyone, trusted no one, and I'm no closer to the truth than I was the night I held my mother while she died. Senna's throat ached. I need someone who can see what I can't, Corvin said quietly. Someone who can look at the people around me and tell me which ones are lying. Which one killed my parents? Which one is still planning to destroy everything I've built? And if I refuse, then I'll finish my wine, pay for your dinner, and walk away. You'll never see me again. He paused. But you won't refuse. You're awfully confident. No, I'm observant. He studied her with that penetrating gaze. You've spent your whole life seeing lies and being unable to do anything about it. Watching people deceive each other, hurt each other, destroy each other, while you stayed silent because speaking up meant exposing yourself. Something shifted in his expression. I'm offering you the chance to finally use your gift for something that matters, to bring justice instead of just witnessing injustice. The words hit harder than Senna wanted to admit. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. Even if I believed you, she said slowly, even if I wanted to help, I'm nobody. I work in an archive. I eat instant noodles for dinner 3 nights a week. I don't exactly move in circles where I'd encounter your counsel. That's easily solved. How? Corvin's smile was sharp, almost predatory. By telling you who I actually am. Senna's stomach dropped. Who are you? He reached into his jacket and withdrew something small. A medallion, gold, stamped with a crest she'd seen before, emblazoned on flags and currency and the formal declarations that governed every pack in the Northern Territories. The royal crest. My name is Corvin Ashfeld, he said quietly, Alpha King of the 6 Dominions, and I'm asking you to come to my court and find the traitor who murdered my parents before they murder me too. The restaurant noise faded to static. Alpha King. The words echoed in Senna's skull, refusing to settle into anything that made sense. She'd seen his face before, she realized now. On news broadcasts, in the society pages her roommate liked to scroll through, always photographed at a distance, always surrounded by guards and advisors. But those images hadn't captured this. The exhaustion etched around his eyes, the tension coiled in his shoulders, the way he held himself like a man expecting a knife in the back at any moment. You're serious, Senna breathed. I rarely joke about treason and murder. The Alpha King doesn't just sit down at restaurants with strangers. The Alpha King does whatever is necessary to protect his people. Corvin tucked the medallion back into his jacket. Even if that means borrowing a suit, dismissing his guards, and approaching a woman who's been stood up by a man who doesn't deserve her. Senna's mind raced. The implications were staggering. If he was telling the truth, and she saw no shadows, no smoke, nothing but crystalline honesty, then the most powerful man in the 6 Dominions was sitting across from her, asking for help. Why me? She demanded. You have resources, armies, spies. Why chase down some archivist with an ability you shouldn't even know exists? Because spies can be bought. Armies can be infiltrated. Every resource I have is potentially compromised. His voice hardened. I've spent 3 years watching people I trusted, waiting for one of them to slip. They haven't. Whoever killed my parents is patient, careful, and very, very good at lying. He paused. But they can't fool you. You don't know that. Your mother's notes were thorough. She documented your gift extensively, encrypted in journals she left with a contact in the borderlands. According to her records, you've never been wrong. Not once. Senna closed her eyes. Of course, her mother had kept records. Isabeth Voss had been meticulous about everything, terrified that her daughter's gift would be discovered, equally terrified that it would be lost. What exactly are you asking me to do? Attend my court for 14 days, observe the inner council, the advisors who had access to my parents the night they died. Watch them, read them. Corvin's jaw tightened. Tell me which one is lying. And in exchange? Name your price. Senna laughed, sharp and disbelieving. I can't just name a price. I don't even know what my life is worth to you. Everything. No hesitation. Nothing but crystalline truth in every syllable. If you help me find the traitor, I will give you anything within my power to grant. Gold, land, a new identity, protection for the rest of your life. His gaze held hers. Or if you prefer, I'll simply let you disappear. New name, new city, enough money to never work again. The people chasing you will never find you. Senna's breath caught. How do you know people are chasing me? Because you've moved 6 times in 3 years. Because you work under a false surname. Because every time someone looks at you too long, your heart rate spikes and you map the nearest exits. Corvin's expression softened slightly. I recognize fear, Senna. I've lived with it for 3 years. She wanted to deny it. But what was the point? He already knew. 14 days, she said slowly. And then, I'm free to go? You have my word. The word of a king I just met? Something flickered in his amber eyes. Then let me give you something stronger than words. Corvin reached into his jacket again and withdrew a small silver knife, the handle wrapped in worn leather, the blade etched with symbols that seemed to shimmer in the candlelight. A blood oath, Senna said flatly. You want to bind me with magic. I want to bind us with magic. He set the knife on the table between them. The oath works both ways. I swear to release you after 14 days, to pay whatever price we agree upon, to never use your gift against your will. You swear to observe my court honestly and share what you see. He paused. If either of us breaks the oath, the magic extracts a price. It's the only guarantee I can offer that requires no trust. Senna stared at the knife. Blood oaths were old magic, the kind most people thought had died out centuries ago, the kind her mother had whispered about in warning tones. They're binding, little one. Unbreakable. Be careful what you promise with blood. What price? Senna asked. If one of us breaks the oath? Pain. Proportional to the betrayal. Corvin's voice was matter-of-fact. Break a small promise. Feel a small agony. Break a large one. He didn't finish. You'd risk that? For a stranger? I'd risk anything to find my parents' killer. No smoke, no shadow, just grief and determination so raw it made her chest ache. Senna picked up the knife. The handle was warm, almost alive, humming faintly against her palm. She watched Corvin draw the blade across his own hand first, a thin line of crimson welling up, dark in the dim light. He offered the knife back. Her cut was shallower, stinging sharply as blood beaded along her palm. Then Corvin extended his hand and she took it, pressing their wounds together. The magic hit like lightning. Senna gasped as something vast and ancient surged through the connection, sealing the oath with power that tasted like storms and old forests, and something else, something that wrapped around her bones and pulled. And beneath the oath, tangled within it, she felt him. Not his thoughts, not exactly, but his presence. A thread of awareness that hadn't existed a moment ago, now woven into the fabric of her being. She sensed his surprise, sharp and startled, mirroring her own. Then recognition. Something inside her knew him the way roots knew soil, the way tides knew the moon. An ancient, instinctive pull that had nothing to do with oaths or magic and everything to do with... Corvin released her hand abruptly. His expression was shuttered, controlled, but she caught the slight tremor in his fingers as he wrapped a handkerchief around his palm. "That wasn't supposed to happen," he said quietly. "What was that?" He didn't answer immediately, just studied her with those guarded eyes, now wary in a way they hadn't been before. "Something we'll discuss later," he finally said, "when we have more privacy." The thread between them pulsed, warm, insistent, impossible to ignore. Senna wrapped her own hand, her thoughts spinning. She'd heard stories, fairy tales her mother dismissed as fantasy, about wolves and their fated mates, about bonds that transcended choice. Impossible, she told herself. Those are just stories. But the thread disagreed. Dawn was breaking over the mountains when the convoy finally stopped. Senna had spent the night in a vehicle nicer than any apartment she'd ever rented, watching the city lights give way to forest, then foothills, then the jagged peaks of the Ashfeld Range. Corvin had traveled separately, claiming security protocols, but she'd felt him the entire time. That invisible tether between them, stirring faintly, tracking his presence like a compass needle pointing north. She didn't know what to do with that, so she ignored it. The citadel of Ironhold rose from the mountainside like it had grown there, all dark stone and silver-capped towers, windows glinting in the early light. From a distance, it looked forbidding. A fortress designed to intimidate, to warn enemies that this was not a place easily conquered. But when Senna stepped through the main gates, she found something unexpected. Gardens, lush and green despite the altitude, filled with flowers she didn't recognize, and trees heavy with fruit. Children chasing each other across manicured lawns while their parents watched from stone benches. An old woman feeding birds near a fountain that sparkled with morning sun. "Not what you expected?" A voice beside her. Female, warm with amusement. Senna turned to find a woman about her age with copper-bright hair and a spray of freckles across her nose. She wore practical clothing, leathers and linen, and carried herself with an ease that suggested she belonged here completely. "I'm Bryn," the woman said, extending her hand. "His Majesty asked me to show you to your quarters and help you settle in. I'm his cousin, so I'm one of the few people he trusts not to spy on you." She grinned. "Much." Senna shook her hand cautiously. "Senna." "I know. Corvin's been talking about you for weeks." "Well," Bryn amended, "not talking exactly. More like brooding intensely while reading files, which for him is practically gushing." A surprised laugh escaped Senna before she could stop it. Bryn's grin widened. "Come on, I'll give you the tour." The inside of the citadel continued to defy expectations. Yes, there were guards at every junction, warriors in dark armor with watchful eyes, but there were also tapestries in warm colors, fires burning in every hearth, the smell of baking bread drifting from somewhere below. Senna's room was larger than her entire apartment back in the city. A bed piled with furs and embroidered quilts, a copper tub already filled with steaming water, windows that overlooked the gardens and, beyond them, the valley stretching toward the horizon. "His Majesty said you're to have anything you need," Bryn said from the doorway. "Food, clothing, books, whatever. Just ring the bell, and someone will come." "Why?" Senna asked before she could stop herself. "Why what?" "Why am I being treated like a guest? I'm here to do a job." "I expected—" She paused, not sure how to finish. "A dungeon? Chains? Bread and water?" Bryn's eyebrows rose. "You're here to help us. Why would we treat you poorly?" "Because that's what powerful people do," Senna thought. "They take what they need and discard the rest." But she didn't say it, because Bryn's words carried no smoke, no shadow. Just genuine confusion at the very idea of mistreatment. "Get some rest," Bryn said gently. "Corvin will want to introduce you to the council this evening. It's better if you're not exhausted when you meet the people you'll be reading." She left, closing the door softly behind her. Senna sank onto the bed, her mind reeling. The room was warm. The bath was waiting. Everything about this place whispered safety in ways she hadn't felt since her mother died. Which meant either she'd stumbled into something genuinely good, or the trap was more sophisticated than she'd ever imagined. That invisible tether stirred again. Corvin, somewhere in the citadel, his presence a steady warmth at the edge of her awareness. What have I gotten myself into? The council chamber was a semicircle of carved stone seats, facing a raised dais where Corvin sat alone. 11 chairs, 11 advisors, 11 potential murderers. Senna stood in the shadows near the eastern pillar, positioned where she could observe without being the center of attention. Corvin had introduced her simply as a consultant, a specialist in behavioral analysis brought in to assist with security matters. Some of the council had nodded politely, others had barely glanced her way. All of them lied within the first 10 minutes. Small lies, mostly. Lord Hadric Sten, silver-haired and distinguished, claimed he'd reviewed the trade agreements thoroughly when wisps of smoke curled around his words, suggesting he'd merely skimmed them. Lady Malis, elegant in burgundy silk, expressed full confidence in the border patrols, while gray tendrils betrayed her private doubts. Commander Jorek declared his troops ready for any threat, though shadows flickered at the edges of his certainty. Normal deception, the kind that lubricated politics and protected egos. But when Corvin raised the matter of his parents' murder, asking for any new information or theories, the room changed. 10 of the 11 advisors responded with varying degrees of genuine grief, frustration, or helplessness. Their lies were peripheral, small exaggerations about how hard they'd searched, minor deflections about old suspicions they'd never voiced. One advisor went completely dark. Lord Hadric Sten's response was a masterpiece of performance. His voice trembled with emotion. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. His words painted a picture of devoted service and endless sorrow. And every single syllable was wrapped in smoke so thick Senna could barely see his face through it. She kept her expression neutral, gave no sign, but her pulse quickened. Found you. After the session ended, Senna waited in the small antechamber Corvin had designated for their private meetings. The bond flickered with shared feeling as he approached, and she felt his exhaustion before he even opened the door. Well, he closed the door behind him, his shoulders dropping slightly, the regal posture giving way to simple weariness. Lord Hadric Sten. Corvin went very still. You're certain? When you asked about your parents' murder, everyone else showed normal deception. Small lies, social lies, the kind people tell without thinking. Senna met his eyes. Sten's entire response was false. Every word, every expression. He was performing grief, not feeling it. Hadric. Corvin's voice was hollow. He's been on the council for 32 years. He taught me to ride. He stood beside my father at his coronation. I'm sorry. Don't be. His jaw hardened. I asked for truth. You gave it. He moved to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. Now I need proof. Something beyond your testimony that I can bring before the other lords. You don't trust my word? I trust it completely. He turned back to face her. But Hadric is beloved. Respected. If I accuse him without evidence, half the council will turn against me, and the other half will question my judgment. His hands clenched at his sides. I need documents, witnesses, something tangible. Then we find it. Corvin studied her for a long moment. You don't have to do this. The oath was for observation, not investigation. If Hadric realizes you're a threat, he killed your parents. Senna's voice came out fiercer than she intended. He's been sitting across from you for 3 years, pretending to mourn, probably planning to kill you too. And you think I'm going to walk away? Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude too deep for words. Why do you care? He asked quietly. You've known me for 2 days. Because the thread between us won't let me not care, she thought. Because your grief feels like my grief now. Because when you hurt, I hurt, and I don't know how to stop it. But she didn't say any of that. Because I've spent my whole life watching people lie and doing nothing about it, she said instead. You gave me a chance to change that. I'm not wasting it. Corvin crossed the room in 3 strides. For a moment she thought he might touch her. His hand rose, hesitated inches from her face, and then dropped back to his side. Thank you, he said roughly. I don't... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. I'm not good at this. Trusting people, accepting help. But you make it easier. The connection between them hummed. Senna smiled despite herself. Don't get used to it. I'm told I'm very difficult. Good. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. I'd hate to be the only one. Over the next 3 days, they worked together. Corvin provided access to records, correspondence, anything that might connect Hadric to the poisoning. Senna observed more council sessions, mapping the relationships between advisors, noting who Hadric spoke with privately, tracking the lies that flowed around him like tributaries feeding a poisoned river. And slowly, painfully, she found herself trusting him. It wasn't any single moment. It was the accumulation of small things. The way he always asked before requesting her presence, never demanded. The way he noticed when she was tired and insisted she rest. The way he brought her tea without being asked, remembered that she took it without sugar, made sure her meals included the honeyed bread she'd mentioned liking once. One afternoon, she found him in the training yard, sparring with Commander Jorik. He moved with brutal efficiency, every strike controlled, every defense precise. But when he saw her watching from the colonnade, he called a halt and walked toward her, barely winded despite the exertion. You didn't have to stop, she said. I wanted to. He grabbed a cloth from a nearby bench, wiping sweat from his face. How goes the search? Slowly. Hadric's careful. Whatever records exist, he's hidden them well. Corvin nodded, unsurprised. He's had 32 years to learn how to cover his tracks. He studied her for a moment. Have you eaten today? I had breakfast. That was 8 hours ago, Senna. I got distracted. He sighed, but there was fondness in it. Come, the kitchens make excellent meat pies at this hour, and you're no good to either of us if you collapse from hunger. He led her through winding corridors she hadn't explored yet, pointing out history along the way. The tapestry depicting his great-grandmother's victory at Blackmoor, the alcove where his father proposed to his mother, the window seat where he used to hide as a child when lessons bored him. He was showing her his home, his history, his heart. And Senna found herself wanting to stay. On the 3rd night, she found him in the library, surrounded by papers, his head in his hands. You should sleep, she said from the doorway. Can't. He didn't look up. If I miss something, if there's a detail I overlooked, you'll miss it anyway if you're exhausted. Corvin laughed, hollow and tired. You sound like my mother. Senna crossed the room and sat across from him. Tell me about her. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he began to speak. About his mother's laugh, his father's patience, the way they'd looked at each other across crowded rooms, like no one else existed. The night they died, how he'd been the one to find them, how his mother had still been breathing when he reached her, how she'd tried to speak but couldn't, how the light had faded from her eyes while he screamed for help that came too late. When he finished, his cheeks were wet. Senna reached across the table and took his hand. Their bond flared between them, warm and bright, but she didn't let go. Neither did he. You'll find justice for them, she said softly. We'll find it together. Corvin's fingers tightened around hers. Together, he repeated, like he was testing the word. like he'd forgotten what it meant to not be alone. The breakthrough came on day 7. Senna was reviewing Hadrick's correspondence when she found it. A letter dated 2 weeks before the murder, addressed to someone identified only by initials. The language was coded, oblique, but certain phrases stood out. The garden requires pruning. The old growth must be cleared for new blossoms to thrive. The timing must be precise. Too early and the frost returns. Too late and the opportunity withers. Our mutual friend assures me the preparation will be undetectable. We proceed as discussed. It's him, Senna breathed. It's actually him. She found Corvin on the eastern battlements, staring out at the valley below. The wind whipped his dark hair across his forehead, and in the fading light, he looked younger somehow. Less like a king, more like a man carrying an impossible burden. Senna. He turned as she approached, something flickering in his amber eyes. What is it? She showed him the letter. His expression didn't change as he read it, but she felt the shift through their bond. Grief and rage and vindication tangled together into something sharp and painful. 3 years, he said quietly. 3 years of looking everyone in the eye and wondering, and he was right there, sitting beside me, advising me. His hand crumpled the edge of the paper. I trusted him. You couldn't have known. I should have. His voice cracked. I'm the Alpha King. I'm supposed to protect everyone, and I couldn't even protect my own parents from a man I saw every day. Corvin! Senna stepped closer, close enough to touch. This isn't your fault. Hadrick spent decades building his mask. He fooled everyone, not just you. But I'm the one who has to live with it. He met her eyes, and the vulnerability there stole her breath. I'm the one who has to execute a man I loved like family, who has to stand before my people and admit that I failed them. You didn't fail them. You found the truth. You found the truth. His hand came up, hovering near her face, not quite touching. I was fumbling in the dark until you came. Their bond pulsed between them, insistent, undeniable. Corvin, Senna whispered, not sure what she was asking for. I know. His voice was rough. I know we barely know each other. I know you came here for a job, not for... He stopped, jaw tightening. But I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop feeling you here. He pressed his fist against his chest, like you've always been there. Like I was missing something I didn't know I needed until I found it. The bond, she said. It's the bond making us feel... No. He shook his head. The bond showed me you existed. But everything I feel... His hand finally touched her face, fingers trembling against her cheek. That's real. That's me. Senna's pulse raced. She should pull away. Should remind him of their agreement. Their timeline. The 1,000 reasons this was a terrible idea. But his skin was warm against hers, and his whiskey gold eyes held nothing but honesty, and their connection was singing in her blood like it had been waiting her whole life for this moment. She kissed him. Corvin made a sound like breaking, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her close. He kissed her back with 3 years of loneliness and a lifetime of restraint collapsing at once. Gentle but desperate, reverent but hungry. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. Stay, he breathed. After this is over, after Hadrick is dealt with, and the 14 days are done, stay with me. Corvin, I'm not asking for forever. Not yet. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Just don't run. Give me a chance to prove this is worth it. Give us a chance. The fear was still there. The instinct to flee, to protect herself, to trust nothing good because good things always shattered. But stronger than the fear was their bond, and stronger than the bond was the look in his eyes, hope and terror intertwined. A king who'd lost everything asking for one small thing. Ask me again, Senna said softly, after Hadric is dealt with. Ask me again when we're not standing in the middle of a crisis. Is that a maybe? It's a don't give up on me yet. Corvin smiled, slow and wondering. I can work with that. They planned the confrontation for the following evening. Corvin would present the letter before the full council, supported by additional evidence Senna had helped compile. Hadric would be arrested, tried, and if found guilty, executed. Clean, legal, final. But Hadric moved first. Senna was in her chambers, reviewing her notes one final time when the door burst open. 3 men in dark clothing, no insignia, no hesitation. She screamed, but a hand clamped over her mouth before the sound could carry. Something sharp pricked her neck. The world went fuzzy at the edges. Corvin, she thought desperately, reaching for their bond. Corvin, help. Then darkness swallowed her whole. She woke in chains, stone walls, no windows, the smell of damp and old blood. Her wrists ached where iron bit into skin, and her head throbbed from whatever they'd drugged her with. Ah, you're awake. Senna's blood froze. Lord Hadric Sten stepped out of the shadows, his distinguished face twisted into something she'd never seen before. Gone was the grieving advisor, the loyal servant. In his place stood a predator who'd finally dropped his mask. You've caused me considerable trouble, Hadric said conversationally. 3 years of patience ruined in a week by some girl who sees smoke. Corvin will find me. Will he? Hadric smiled, and it was terrible. By the time he realizes you're missing, you'll be dead, and I'll be long gone, along with enough gold to live very comfortably in exile. He leaned closer. But first, I have questions. Who else knows? What evidence did you share? How much does the king actually have? Go to hell. The slap snapped her head sideways. Stars exploded across her vision. While he spoke, Senna worked her wrists against the iron, feeling skin abrade, blood slicking the metal. If she could just get one hand free. I was hoping you'd say that. Hadric pulled a knife from his belt. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to be persuasive. Their bond pulsed frantically. Senna focused on it, pouring everything she had into the connection, praying Corvin could feel her fear. Find me. Please, find me. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Hadric continued, pacing before her. You're going to tell me everything, and then I'm going to kill you. And then I'm going to kill your precious king the same way I killed his parents. Slowly, intimately, watching the light leave his eyes. You're a monster. I'm a patriot. Hadric's expression twisted with righteous fury. The Ashfeld line has grown weak. Corvin's father wanted peace, compromise, diplomacy. As if those things built empires. As if strength came from anything but dominance. He pressed the blade against her throat. I tried to guide him. Tried to show him the old ways. When he refused to listen, I did what was necessary. You murdered your king. I saved my kingdom. The blade bit deeper. Senna felt blood trickle down her neck. Corvin, she screamed through their bond. Now. Corvin felt her terror like a knife to the chest. One moment he was reviewing the arrest protocols with Commander Jorik. The next, he was on his knees, gasping, the connection between him and Senna screaming with her fear. Your Majesty? Jorik reached for him. What's wrong? Senna. Corvin was already moving, running, their bond pulling him like a compass. They have Senna. He didn't wait for backup, didn't wait for plans or protocols or any of the things a king was supposed to consider. He followed the bond through corridors and downstairs, past startled servants and confused guards, until he reached the old dungeons beneath the eastern tower. Dungeons that hadn't been used in decades. Dungeons everyone had forgotten existed. Everyone except Hadric. Corvin kicked the door open with strength born of rage and desperation. Hadric spun, blade still pressed to Senna's throat. Blood trickled from a cut on her cheek, and her eyes were wide with pain and relief and terror. "Don't," Hadric warned. "One more step and she dies." Corvin stopped. His wolf clawed at the edges of his control, howling for blood, but he forced himself to stillness. "Let her go, Hadric." "Let her go?" Hadric laughed high and wild. "She ruined everything. 32 years of planning, of patience, of waiting for the perfect moment. And this nobody destroys it in a week. You killed my parents. I freed this kingdom." Hadric's eyes blazed with fervor. "Your father was weak, soft. He wanted peace with the borderlands, trade with the southern wolves, and alliance instead of dominance. I tried to guide him, to show him strength, but he wouldn't listen. The knife pressed harder against Senna's throat. So I removed him, and your mother, unfortunately, saw too much." Senna made a small sound of pain. Corvin's vision hazed red. "You were supposed to be easier," Hadric continued. "Grieving, distracted, easy to manipulate. But you surprised me, held the kingdom together. Earned loyalty I thought would be mine." His lip curled. "So I adjusted, waited, planned a second removal. You'll never leave this room alive, won't I?" Hadric smiled. "I have your mate, your fated mate, rare as starfall. If I kill her, the backlash might kill you too. At the very least, it'll cripple you." His grip on Senna tightened. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to let me walk out of here. Give me a horse and a head start. And maybe, if you're very lucky, I'll leave her alive." "He's lying," Senna gasped, her voice thin but steady. "He's going to kill us both. I can see the smoke pouring off him. Every word is black." Hadric's composure cracked. "Shut up." Corvin's eyes met Senna's. Understanding passed between them. "There's something you don't know about fated bonds, Hadric," Corvin said quietly. "Oh?" "They go both ways." Senna moved. She'd been working her wrists the entire time Hadric monologued, abrading skin against iron until blood slicked the metal. Now she twisted, yanking one hand free with a cry of pain, and drove her elbow into Hadric's stomach. The knife slipped. Corvin was across the room before Hadric could recover. His fist connected with the old man's face once, twice, 3 times, sending him sprawling. The knife clattered away. Corvin kicked it out of reach and stood over his parents' murderer, breathing hard, fists still clenched. "It's over," he said. "You don't have proof," Hadric spat through bloodied teeth. "My word against yours. The council has the letter." Commander Jorik's voice came from the doorway. Behind him stood a dozen guards, and behind them, several council members with horrified expressions. "We heard everything, the confession." His expression was granite. "It's over, Hadric." Hadric looked at the faces of his former colleagues, saw no sympathy, no support, just disgust and betrayal. He began to laugh. 32 years, he gasped. 32 years, and it ends in a dungeon. At least tell me it was worth it." His wild eyes found Senna. "Tell me you're something special, girl. Something worth all this chaos." Senna stepped forward, her wrists bleeding, her face bruised and her voice steady. "I'm the woman who saw through you," she said. "That's all I needed to be." The guards dragged Hadric away, and then Corvin's arms were around her, crushing her against his chest, his face buried in her hair. "I thought I lost you," he breathed. "I felt your fear and I thought, you found me." She held him just as tight. "You found me." 3 days later, Hadric was executed. Senna didn't attend. She'd seen enough of him in her nightmares, felt the phantom press of his blade often enough when she closed her eyes. Corvin understood. He went alone and returned looking older, hollowed out, but somehow lighter. "It's done," he said, finding her in the library. "How do you feel?" "Empty." He sank into the chair beside her. "Relieved." Guilty for feeling relieved. His hand found hers. "But also free, for the first time in 3 years. Like I can finally breathe." "Good." She squeezed his fingers. "You deserve to breathe." They sat in comfortable silence as the fire crackled. "The 14 days are up tomorrow," Corvin said finally. Senna's chest tightened. "I know. I keep my promises." His voice was steady, but she felt his fear through their bond. "If you want to leave, the gold is waiting. New identity. Safe passage. Everything I offered." "Is that what you want?" "You know it isn't." He turned to face her, and his amber eyes held nothing back. "I want you to stay. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're here. I want to spend the rest of my life learning every single thing about you." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But I want you to choose it. Freely. Not because of the bond or the oath or any obligation. Because you want this too." Senna thought about the life waiting outside these walls. Safety. Anonymity. Freedom from all the complications that came with loving a king. And she thought about the life here. The bond that had become as essential as breathing. The man who'd seen her gift as salvation instead of curse. The home she'd found in the place she'd least expected. "I spent my whole life running," she said slowly, hiding, convincing myself that alone was the same as safe. She met his eyes. "You're the first person who made me want to stop." Hope blazed across his face. "Senna, I love you." The words came easier than she'd expected. "I don't know when it happened. Somewhere between the restaurant and the dungeons, probably. But it's true, and I'm done being afraid of it." Corvin pulled her into his arms. "Say it again." "I love you." Again. She laughed against his mouth. "I love you, you impossible man." He kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. Like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. Like she was home. "Stay," he breathed. "Yes." "Marry me." "Yes." "Be my queen." "Now you're pushing your luck." He laughed, bright and free. "Is that a no?" "It's an ask me again in a year when we've had at least one proper date." "Done." He kissed her forehead. "I'll give you 1,000 proper dates. 1,000,000. Whatever it takes. Just start with one." She smiled up at him. "And maybe don't stand me up this time." Corvin's expression softened. "His mistake," he said quietly. "The man who didn't show. He gave me the greatest gift of my life." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I should probably thank him. Or we could just forget he existed. Even better." 1 year later, Senna stood on the battlements where they'd shared their first kiss, watching the sunset over the Ashfeld Range. So much had changed. Hadrick's co-conspirators had been rooted out. A network of traditionalists who'd opposed the late king's progressive policies. The council had been restructured. New alliances had been forged. And Corvin, finally free of the shadow that had haunted him, had become the king his parents always knew he could be. And Senna had found something she'd never dared to hope for. A home. A purpose. A love that grew stronger with every passing day. "There you are." She turned to find Corvin approaching, still in his formal attire from the day's council session. His crown sat slightly askew, and he looked tired, but his eyes lit up when they found her. "Hiding from the diplomats?" he asked, joining her at the wall. "They kept asking about the wedding menu. I had to escape before I said something undiplomatic about the fish course." He laughed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Fair enough." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the colors bleed across the sky. "I have something for you," Corvin said finally. "Another gift? You've already given me a library, a garden, and that ridiculous horse who only likes me. This is different. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Senna's breath caught. 1 year, Corvin said softly. You asked me to wait 1 year before asking properly. He opened the box to reveal a ring. Simple gold band, set with a stone the color of his eyes. Senna Voss, will you marry me? Not because of the bond, not because of politics, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. She didn't hesitate. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like forever. The wedding was held 1 month later. The great hall of Ironhold had been transformed with flowers and candlelight, every seat filled with people who had become family. Commander Jorik stood at attention near the doors. Lady Mylis dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. And Bryn, who had declared herself chief wedding planner and threatened diplomatic incidents if anyone tried to stop her, beamed from the front row. Senna walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory and gold, her mother's comb tucked into her hair. Corvin waited at the altar, his crown polished, and his eyes bright with unshed tears. When they spoke their vows, promising partnership and honesty and love freely given, Senna felt their bond settle into something new. Not a chain, but a bridge. Not a trap, but a choice renewed with every breath. I choose you, Corvin whispered against her lips. I choose you back, she said, every day, for the rest of our lives. Later that night, tangled together in their chambers, Senna traced patterns on his chest while he played with her hair. I was thinking about that night, she said. The restaurant. Merrick standing me up. What about it? If he'd shown up, I would have sat through an awkward dinner with a man I didn't really like and gone home alone. I would have kept hiding, kept running. She looked up at him. But he didn't show, and you took the empty seat. His mistake. Corvin smiled, soft and wondering. Your gain. Our beginning. He kissed her forehead. The best night of my life. Senna settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling their bond hum with quiet contentment. She'd walked into that restaurant expecting disappointment. She'd found a king, a purpose, and a love that had rewritten everything she thought she knew about herself. Merrick's mistake had become her destiny, and she'd never been more grateful for a stood-up date in her life. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.